Some folks think people in the South are too nosy. I get it. 10 minutes after meeting someone for the first time, a Southerner might ask, "Now, what was your grandmother's maiden name?" And before you can answer, they're off and running. "Did you ever know Sylvia Dancy? Well, she went to Ole Miss, but her brother Robert broke family tradition and went to Mississippi State. Just about broke their mama's heart. Last I heard, he was living somewhere up north, Michigan, maybe, or Minnesota, one of those." And on it goes until your cup of family genealogy is filled right up to the brim. The story I'm about to tell began exactly that way. It was 1983, and I had dropped by my friend David's house for some reason I can no longer remember. His mother was standing in the living room ironing shirts. Oddly enough, I'd known David for 7 or 8 years, but I'd never met her. Our daughters, Savannah and Chance, were crib mates over at the home of Miss Couples, who lived in the Peabody Cooper neighborhood in Memphis. Miss Couples lived in a neat little shotgun house and took care of our toddlers the way only a grandmother can. She loved those children as if they belonged to her. After introductions, David's mother went back to her ironing. I stood there watching her work. She folded each shirt in a way I'd never seen before, carefully lining up the front and the back before smoothing the fabric with her hands and running the iron across it. Finally, I asked, "So you ironed the front and the back at the same time?" She smiled. "Of course." Then she patiently explained her method. I was really impressed by that. As we talked, I noticed she kept looking at me in a curious way. Not suspicious exactly, more like she was trying to place me. After a while, she asked, "Where are you from, Willie?" "Mississippi," I said. "Really? Where?" "Rolling Fork." She nodded and went back to ironing. A few moments later, she asked another question. "Where are your people from?" Now, that's a very Southern question. Not where are you from, but where are your people from? I told her my father's family was from Port Gibson and my mother's people were from over in central Mississippi. She stopped moving the iron. "Where in central Mississippi?" "Leake County, a little place called Standing Pine." She looked up so quickly I thought she might drop the iron. "What was your mother's maiden name?" "Wright," I said. "Virginia Wright." She stared at me for a second. Then she said, "Oh, my Lord." It turns out she had grown up with my mother, Virginia, her brother, M.O., and sister, Maudel. The funny feeling when she had when I first walked through the door suddenly made sense. At least it made sense to her. I wasn't so sure. What amazed me was that before she knew my name, before she knew where I was from, before she knew anything about my family, she had already sensed something familiar. Something that had traveled across half a century and announced itself before either of us understood what was happening. And all of it had started with a conversation about ironing shirts. For the next hour, we traveled back to Standing Pine. We talked about my grandparents and great-grandparents. We talked about the Mississippi Band of Choctaw Indians, the people who had remained behind when so many others were forced west on the Trail of Tears. She remembered things I had only heard mentioned in passing. She talked about my great-grandmother's house, now considered something of a local landmark. "Have you ever noticed how thick the walls downstairs are?" she asked. Everybody asked that question. The original log cabin was still inside the house. Long before the larger home was built around it, that cabin had stood by itself. The old house was literally carrying its own history inside its walls. She remembered Callie, the wife of Choctaw Chief Joe Chitto, Callie worked for my great-grandmother, and after my great-grandfather died in 1935, remained by my grandmother's side for the rest of her life. She told me something else I had heard before. The Choctaws didn't call the community Standing Pine. They called it Trickum. The explanation was simple. The merchants and landowners around there were forever taking advantage of them. Trickum. You have to admit that's a pretty insightful name. The stories kept coming. The Depression, World War II, the families, the people who had already passed on. All the while, she continued ironing shirts. Finally, she looked at me and said, "Want to try one?" And that's how I learned to iron. It's a skill that served me well when I was working at Motion Picture Lab and had to wear a shirt and tie every day. My mother and Claudine became reacquainted after that afternoon. And over the next year or two, they spent time on the telephone talking about the old days. They were both in their 60s by then. They had lived through the Depression. They had lived through World War II. My Uncle M.O. had crossed the Rhine River with the American Army and was killed in Germany just weeks before the war in Europe ended. Many of the people they remembered were already gone. Sometimes I wish I knew what they knew. I wish I could sit quietly in a room and listen to them talk about those years. Not the big events, the little ones, the ordinary days, the things nobody thought to write down. A week or two after my visit, David stopped by my house. "I've got something for you," he said. It was a photograph his mother had taken sometime around 1926. In the picture stood 3 children, my mother, Virginia, her brother, M.O., and their sister, Maudelle. I've studied that picture many times over the years. What caught their attention? Were they taking a photograph of Claudine? Whatever it was, nobody ever wrote it down. That mystery belongs to history now. But when I turned the photograph over, I found a clue written in a child's hand. 6 simple words. The 3 sweetest kids and Trickum. And suddenly, they were all there again. We spend so much of our lives believing we're individuals moving through the world on our own. Then every once in a while, somebody looks at us and sees not just us, but our people, our grandparents, our hometowns, the stories we carry without even knowing it. Life is lovely.